Thursday, 8th of Cheshvan, October 30th. Now, the Alter Rebbe is going to continue to clarify the puzzling passage of the Kabbalah, of the Zohar, which differentiates between the two dimensions of Torah, one termed the tree of life, while the other termed the tree of good and evil. Let's go. Now, when Malchut Vatzilut, meaning when the Shekhinah is enclosed, it's invested in Klipat Noga, in this interface or this filter we call Klipat Noga, which essentially conceals God to some extent and conceals holiness. But at the same time, it's not a total concealment. It's more like they say like a translucent concealment. Like there's a barrier, but it's not irredeemable. It's not impenetrable. So when again the Shekhinah is in this kind of what do you call it? Like a layer that is, kind of disguising it, what we call reality, where things are good and bad, look like they're good, look a mixture of good and bad. It's in order to extract and refine the sparks that fell with the sin of Adam. The whole reason that we deal in a world of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, we deal in this type of reality of Klipat Noga is because we're here to repair it, extract the sparks as well as the 288 sparks that fell with the breaking of the vessels, which is a whole other subject of even before creation, before the fall from the Garden of Eden. There was, God did kind of a world that was too much light, too little vessel, it shattered, and there has been hidden sparks within in the darkest of places. So anyways, the point is when Malchut of Atzilut, which is another name for Shekhinah, Kabbalistic jargon for the Shekhinah, it's then referred to as the tree of knowledge of good and evil relative to Zer Anpin of Atzilut. So interesting. We know, because we did a little bit of homework, of what Zer Anpin is. Zer Anpin, and remember for the short face, what's the short face represent? What's it just?
The seven lower.
The six midot.
Six
emotional. Very good. So relative to the six emotions in the 10 Sfirot, Malchut is is all relative. In Hebrew, there's a word for relative, yachasit. Yachasit means relative. So relative to pure divinity that is just doing its thing. We call mamay lamat. It's like Hashem is not dependent. God doesn't have to create to be relevant. God is just the true essence. God is the true essence without creating, right? When God creates, it's a decision to create. It's a choice. But you don't have to do that for God to be God, right? God could just be. If God is just being, in many ways we would call that, on some level, the representation of God not tapered to our lower reality would be called the midot. Well, depends how you look at it, but they're not dependent. They're just doing God. They're not being received in another reality. They're just expressing God. Let's say the Sfirot, besides Malchut, particularly the six emotional ones. It's just depictions of it's expressing, right? Okay, you can always say it's somewhat directed, but it's more of an expression of God's self rather than of coming into us, being received. When it's in Malchut is the beginning of that there should now be an other to receive God's presence. But the midot would just be the presence. So, as I understand it, Malchut of Atzilut, even though it's also a depiction of God, and we spoke about this many times, but it's a depiction of God within finitude, the finite, versus the other side of the coin is the infinite God. I guess there's an aspect of God as infinite. There's an aspect of God as finite. As the Kabbalists say, you can't say God can't be finite because you're putting a limitation on God. Right? So Malchut, this is my simple, rudimentary understanding. that Malchut is the side of the coin of God in the finite, and the Midot, the Spheros, are God's depiction of God in the infinite. So when we talk about God expressing in Malchut of Atzilut, aka the Shechina, aka the finite side of the coin, right? You can refer it not that it's essentially good and bad, that it's giving room for the good and the bad to exist. Understand? Can't say anything of God is bad, but God is within everything, in the finite and the bad as well. So it has to be that God gives room for that, I think. And relative to the infinite part of God, where there's no room for any concealment, then on some level, it could be termed the tree of knowledge, good and bad, which the midot do not descend there, and which is referred to as the tree of life. And the investiture of the sphere of Malchut in Klipat Noga is the Kabbalistic principle to exile the Shechina, whereby we said earlier, man rules over man to his detriment. We said in the last chapter, Epistle 25, that we said, right, that the purpose of the Shechina going into exile is ultimately to the detriment of the concealment of the Klipa. The Klipa thinks, oh, we're ruling over the Jews. We're ruling over the sparks of holiness. You get to rule over it as it's slowly refining you to stop being concealment. It's ultimately to the detriment.
Wow.
Okay, so now the Alter Rebbe will now answer another question which he himself had posed earlier. Raya Mehemna, the passage of the Zohar, had stated that so long as the bipolar influence of the tree of knowledge of good and evil is dominant in the world, Torah scholars who are likened in time to Shabbat and festivals are supported only by their unlettered weekday brethren, whose food is sometimes pure but sometimes not. Okay? Whose food is sometimes pure, sometimes not. This is why the scholars engage in the study of the correspondingly bipolar laws of Isser versus Heter, ritual prohibition versus permission, and the like. Okay, concerning this statement, right? Remember the question? This is kind of weird thing that scholars like Shabbos, the simple Jews, the unlettered Jews are like weekdays, and they support Shabbos. Like if the parent weekday for Shabbos, they support the scholars, and this is why scholars in this world have to engage in halacha of Isser and Heter because they have to deal with their supporters. Right, with the unlettered brethren, the unlettered brothers, who are like, mixture of good and evil. So concerning the statement, though, is a big question because the sages in Second Temple times, it says they all owned, everybody's rich. Everybody had security, fields, vineyards. They didn't need to be supported by their brethren. So why they have to study halacha then? And that they for sure study halacha then. Why they study good and bad? If the whole purpose of good and bad is just because, well, we got to deal with the bumpkins, the riffraff, then when they were totally financially independent, they still studied the same laws, but they didn't deal with riffraff. So why were they learning the halach, which is a mixture of kosher and non-kosher, good and bad? This is the meaning of the statement, Raya Mehemna, while the tree of good and evil dominates the world, these sages are likened to Shabbos and festivals, have nothing except when it is given to them by those who are called the unsanctified ones, they're riffraff, good word. This means that at the time of the exile of the Shechina, which grants life force to the Chitzonim, Chitzonim is another term for the forces of concealment that belong to the realm of Klipat Noga, from which the mixed multitude, actually riffraff, that's actually the term. Mixed multitude is also riffraff. Derive their life force, and from whose distilled essence the Torah scholars are nourished during their exile. At this time, the main spiritual task of man, the main purpose of being engaged in Torah and the commandments is to disencumber, elevate the sparks, as is known from the teachings of Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, the Arizal, of blessed memory. In other words, let's see, sir. For this reason, study chiefly involves deliberation, argumentation on the laws of Isser and Heter, impurity and purity, in order to disencumber the permitted and the pure from the forbidden, and the impure by means of deliberation, argumentation on the law, with wisdom, understanding, and knowledge.
I see.
This is fascinating. For as known, the Torah derives from Chachma, in the sphere of its wisdom. Wisdom is Chachma. It doesn't mean wisdom. It really means intuition to truth. Because when you draw into an idea, it's because you have an antenna that is open to receiving ideas that you don't know yet, that's beyond you. So Chachma is it's not just like wisdom, it's more like the capacity to receive big ideas or bigger than yourself ideas. Anyways, the point it's saying is that's Torah. So Torah corresponds to that sphera.
Amen.
Hence, the sparks of holiness hidden in the legal question, sparks hidden in the legal question can only be extracted and elevated through Chachma. Chach is a term in the Zohar, Chachma Espiritu. Basically, Chachma, when you learn Torah, it's not just you're gaining knowledge of what to do or even just ideas. The mere act of learning Torah is surgery. You're essentially dissecting conceptually everything, a topic, something in this world, and by grasping it according to Torah, you're basically refining it. And specifically the supernal chachma of Atzilut, which is vested in Malchut of Atzilut. So there's chachma of Atzilut. It's all in basically the 10th sphere. And chachma goes to learn a topic in the world, which means it's doing the surgery of a topic in the world. It's dissecting something in the world according to God's wisdom.
Wow.
So that's the act of Chachma coming into Malchut. This being the Kabbalistic principle, this is what oral Torah is. It's the taking the divine wisdom, lowering it to dissect reality, and thereby refine it. According to the Kabbalistic principle by which there's a lot of Kabbalistic jargon that he's saying here, but you learn some terms. Abba Yosad Brata, that the father begat the daughter, that Chachma has a relationship with Malchut, which is the feminine, which in turn is invested in the Malchut of Yetzirah. I don't know why it's giving Bria, but it basically would go down to the next world where there's the 10 Sefirot again, but in a lower depiction, in a more concealed depiction. This accords with the Kabbalistic principle of the Mishnayot and the Braitot, which are similar. That are vested in the Klipat Noga, which correspond to the world of Yetzirah. We said earlier, remember we said that the different areas of Torah study correspond to different worlds, because Gemara is logic. It's essentially the world of Bria, is the world of Bina, of comprehension. Yetzirah is the world of emotion. Angels come from emotion, but basically, and Mishnayos, which is just rulings, it's basically a precursor to the Code of Jewish law. It's good, bad. Love, good, stay away from the bad. Fear. So from there, in Yetzirah begins the knowledge of good and evil. For there begins the evil inherent in the world. For the Klipat Noga in the world of Yetzirah is equally good. So this is getting a little bit Kabbalistic, but bad doesn't just appear one day in the physical world. It's kind of goes through like it's the result of screens of concealment. And the screen of concealment in Yetzirah, which is a world of emotion, which hides on kind of that more lofty awareness, comprehension part of, to God, there's room for what we'd call bad. That's much as I get. A variant reading of the above, the Braitot that are vested in the world of Klipa Noga, which corresponds to the world of Asiya, for there begins in an evil inherent Noga. Because Yetzirah is already too lofty. It's a world of angels, so you can't say there's bad there. So maybe it means really Asiya. Regardless, the above is known from the teachings of Rabbi Yitzchak Luria of blessed memory. So this is, to me, very, very interesting, because I would tell you, typically when people learn Tanya, particularly daily Tanya, sometimes you just read it, and you don't really get its relevance. But I think this is something which I've seen a little bit, at least in different places in Chassidus, that I'd say this gives you a whole new motivation to study Torah, and particularly all parts of Torah, and even the most minutia, halachic, even obsolete in this exile time, like temple law. Because the point of learning Torah is not just practical. what we call practical, like what to do. The study of Torah is the divine wisdom being utilized to do tikkun olam. How does it do that? Because the divine wisdom is pure. And then it goes and invests itself into realities, different various realities, but we can call them, and maybe in one, what we call chachma, invest itself in malchut, in the Shekhinah. And by doing so, by the chachma, by a person learning Jewish law, by learning oral Torah, not even Kabbalah, just oral Torah, the laws. Even before you lead an observant life, the mere learning of these laws is essentially surgery. It's extracting the good, the divine, the holy, and knowing to stay away from the impure or the unkosher or the stuff that we should stay away from. And that is just by the study alone, you're causing a very powerful effect in the world.
Wow.
Which is, it turns out we were worried. We just said this letter somehow is addressing, the opponents of Hasidus, saying, "Oh, you guys study Kabbalah, you say l'chaim, you're not serious scholars."
Boy.
On the contrary, when you learn this esoteric part of the Torah, it motivates you to study more halacha and more law, because it empowers you to say that it's not about being the smartest guy in the room or being the guy who knows what to do or knowing how to lead a Jewish observant life. That the esoteric study, your study of Jewish law is causing a refinement of reality that is building up, which will lead to a messianic era.
Oh, man.
It's surgery. The mere study is surgery of the good and taking away the bad of reality.